What's going on, FPL managers? Welcome to another video and podcast from Fantasy Football Scout. During the international break, it's been a long one, and we're going to look at Game Week 31, how the template is changing in advance of all of these blanks and double game weeks. And I'm joined by Ryan, aka FPL Inzaghi, all the way from Australia, kindly joining us. How are you, buddy?
Yeah, I'm well, thanks, Ted. It's great to be on TED Talks. I have been a big fan of this show every week, watching it on Fantasy Football Scout. So it's pretty cool that, I'm a fan of the show. I get to come on the show as well as your guest. So yeah, very excited to be here and also talking FPL because we've had the international break and I feel like I need to get my mind back into FPL. So this is the perfect way to do it.
Absolutely. No, thanks for those kind comments. I have been a little bit absent from thinking about FPL as well over the international break. So yeah, nice to get knuckled down a little bit and focus on what we're going to do for Game Week 31. But yeah, the content of this video basically will be looking at a few players, 14 players, who are going to shake up the template. So we'll sort of spend about 5 minutes on each of those. Not going to spend too much time focusing on the likes of Salah and Trent Alexander-Arnold, Son or Kane, and lots of the Arsenal guys, because I think quite largely all of us are going to have a variety of those players already. So yeah, we'll get started by looking at these 14 players. But first of all, just a quick word from our sponsor, which is SoRare Academy. SoRare is a game where you collect cards and you can battle against other people using your selected few cards, and it's like a fantasy game, and if you compete against other people you win prizes and stuff. But in order to get into that, there's a completely free to play game called SoRare Academy, which is like a fantasy game where you pick a 5-side team across all of the top European leagues. And yeah, if you do well in it, you get to earn some of these SoRare cards, and that's a gateway into playing that game. So yeah, the team we've got up there, heavy focus on Liverpool this week. The deadline is 1st of April at 11 a.m, so make sure you're set up for that. But yeah, heavy focus on Liverpool because they're playing Watford, and De Bruyne is in there because they're playing Burnley. I think Liverpool and City have some great fixtures this week. So yeah, probably good to pick those guys. But yeah, check out SoRare Academy. But yeah, on to our... No, that's the wrong one. Hang on.
De Bruyne in the red shirt, that's so rare, was a little bit off-putting as well. Looked like he was trying to sneak into the Liverpool side wearing the red shirt. I didn't even notice him there, but
yeah, it's weird seeing him like that.
Yeah.
But I mean, Liverpool and City have absolutely fantastic fixtures this week, and it's kind of making me scared that I don't have them.
Yeah.
Right. Once I've sorted myself out, got my ducks in a row, hopefully this works in a mo. But yeah, we're going to start focusing on current players we have in our side, like, Aston Villa, Wolves, Leeds, those sort of players that we heavily had in our sides from Game Week 30 because they were the main contenders for that terrible blank game week. Oh my God, what a terrible week. Yeah, I was really annoyed. But yeah, I've got Raphinha in my side. I'm not sure you do, Ryan, but he's been missing a few chances recently, and I'm wondering whether to keep him, certainly for the next couple of weeks. So let me just describe the graphic that I've got up here. The bit at the top is the amount of returns he's had this season, and those are divided up into goals and assists. The goals are in yellow, the assists are in white, and they're also split into the easy ones and the hard ones, or the big and the small chances. So Raphinha scored 5 small chance goals and 4 big chance goals, which is surprising to me because he's been changing his form recently. I think he's just been tapping in those easy goals of late. Whereas beforehand, at the start of the season, he was whipping in balls into the top corner. Those 5 small chances, most evident there. But he's also pretty good for big chances, created goals, those 3 on the right-hand side. So 12 attacking returns all season. It's nice to see that split of how he's scoring those. But the next section down shows how he's been doing with those big chances. And the orange bar there shows how good he's been compared to the best player for big chances, Harry Kane. You can see on the right-hand side, Harry Kane is way, way in advance. And if you think about Raphinha at, 6.5 million compared to Kane at, what is he, about 12.5 million, something like that? Raphinha's not that great compared to Harry Kane. The little white box on the left-hand side shows how many of those big chances he's been converting. Normally with big chances, we assume that that little white box should be about halfway. 50% conversion for big chances is normally quite good, but it's a little bit less than that. And that's not surprising because Raphinha has been kind of poor at converting, hasn't he? Have you been frustrated with Raphinha, Ryan? Like his conversion levels? Have you owned him recently?
Yeah, it's been an interesting story for me with Raphinha this season. I had him from the beginning, and if you remember, he went on that streak of scoring penalties. I remember the game against Crystal Palace where he took the Guaita clean sheet off me in the last couple of minutes, and he compounded that with obviously scoring the goal. And a lot of people owned Raphinha back then, so it kind of hurt me. And most recently, I've had him in my team again after I wildcarded. I didn't captain him back in game week 26, I think it was, when a lot of people, or 27, when a lot of people captained him and he blanked against Leicester City. So to answer your question, have I been frustrated with him? I think I could have been a lot more frustrated with Raphinha if I'd captained him, but thankfully I didn't go down that path. And I've had him in my team. Look, traditionally, he's not such an explosive asset, is he? We know that he's very limited in terms of his double-digit returns. I think he only had one last season, and I'm not sure whether he's registered a double-digit return so far this season. But yeah, am I frustrated with him? I don't think so, because my expectations haven't been super high for Raphinha. For 6.5, if he can tick over with, an assist or a goal every couple of games, then I'm happy with that. And largely, he's done that this season. I think he's under-delivered on what the statistics are telling us, but I haven't set the expectations too high, so I haven't been let down.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? I always think that when a new manager comes into a side, how they change the structure, how they change the way that the team plays is particularly important to the key players. And I wonder whether Leeds start scoring fewer goals, just trying to get slightly more solidified at the back. So maybe the new manager hinders Raphinha's chances, as opposed to a Bielsa's team where Raphinha, and they just wanted to score as many goals as possible. But nevertheless, they've got Southampton and Watford next, and you can see from the bit at the bottom, those orange bars, really, really high, show that they concede a hell of a lot of big chances. And the little white boxes underneath show the proportion of those big chances that they've been conceding as goals. And you can see, compared to like the Palace, Man City, Arsenal in game weeks 34, 35 and 36, Saints and Watford have been conceding way more than those teams. And I mean, it's surprising how bad Southampton have been, because the topmost limit is Leeds. They're the worst team for big chances conceded. That's that little dotted line on the right-hand side saying Leeds. Southampton are nearly as bad as Leeds for big chances conceded. That really surprises me, because I thought Saints were a little bit more solid than that. So if you're thinking about getting rid of Raphinha, I think I'd be tempted to hold on for at least the next couple of games and focus on transferring out some other players instead.
Yeah, for sure. I think if you wanted to transfer out Raphinha, you probably had to do it last game week. I stayed up till deadline, umming and ahhing as to whether I would transfer him out with the COVID rumours. And I eventually sold him for Harvey Barnes. But if you didn't make that move last game week, as you've just said, with Southampton and Watford up next, and the amount of big chances these two teams concede, I feel like you've missed the boat a little bit in terms of selling Raphinha. And the next two fixtures are really nice. So I agree with you, Ted. You hold him for the next two if you've still got him in your team.
I don't think I would be bringing him in if I didn't have him in my side, but he's certainly a hold for the time being. I'd hold, I wouldn't sell, I wouldn't buy. And then from game week 33, which is a big double game week and a blank for Leeds, I think that's a perfect segue into getting rid. So yeah, I think it's a keep for me. Another player that we're considering about getting rid of at the moment is Philip Coutinho,
Mm.
and he's been ticking along nicely for Aston Villa, but the fixtures get pretty difficult, Ryan, don't they? And what are you thinking about Coutinho if you had him? Would you be tempted to get rid of? Because I've got the chart up now. It's taking a little bit of time to transition. Actually, I wonder whether it's that logo in the top right. I might get rid of that. But yeah, the fixtures up next: Wolves and Spurs in game week 31 and game week 32. Sides that don't really tend to concede too many chances. Then he's got a blank in 33. And then some easier fixtures in game week 34 and 35 and 36, where leaky Leicester, very leaky Norwich, and a pretty poor Burnley side. So are we getting rid of Coutinho with these three poor fixtures and then going to get him back from game week 34?
I think it depends a lot on your chip strategy. If you're looking to free hit in 33, there's probably an argument to hold on to Coutinho, especially if I've been looking at Ben Crellin and Planet FPL and what they're kind of predicting with regards to the future double game weeks for Aston Villa. They've still got a game to rearrange against Burnley. And at this stage, it looks as though it's not confirmed, of course, but Ben Crellin and Planet FPL are suggesting that game week 34 could be the time that Aston Villa double against Burnley. We don't know that for sure now. And I'm not sure when we'll have conclusive news on that. But if you're someone who's got a free hit and you're looking to free hit in 33 when Aston Villa blank, you've got Coutinho in your side, there certainly is an argument to hold on to him. Because as you say, look at the fixtures from 34 onwards. And if they double in 34, that's a double against Leicester and Burnley, which is really appealing from an Aston Villa point of view. So I think it does depend on your chip strategy. But if you're not free hitting in 33, I think he is a sell, especially with all the other midfielders around his price that have double game weeks to come. So I'm sure we'll touch on some of the Leicester midfielders later on, but James Maddison and Harvey Barnes are two players that many managers are considering right now. Of course, we have the Arsenal trio. You've got Martinelli, Saka, Odegaard as well. And Crystal Palace have some nice fixtures coming up, and they, of course, double as well in game week 36. So I think it does depend on your chip strategy. For me, I don't have any chips remaining. If you're not planning on free hitting, just like me, whether you're not planning on it or you can't do it, I think there's every reason to sell Coutinho for one of the more appealing mid-price midfielders.
Yeah, it's a really good point about free hitting in 33, actually, because if you are free hitting in 33, you would be tempted to hold on for these two games and just get through game weeks 31 and 32 because those fixtures after 33 are great. I own Coutinho. I'm pretty sure I'm not going to free hit in 33. So I think it means a sell for me because his price point, what is it, 7.4, 7.5 million? That can be easily spent focusing on some key players from Chelsea or City or even Liverpool in the likes of Havertz, Foden or Luis Diaz or whoever. That's a really nice price point to get some upside from these top teams. So I would be tempted to sell Coutinho, sadly, but I'd be kind of scared going without him from game week 34, some prime fixtures. Another key player in this price bracket that I think quite a few people might own is Kulusevski. And he's a little bit cheaper than Coutinho, it has to be said. 6.4, 6.5 million, something like that. I would be a word of warning on Kulusevski. Look at his stats here. So he's come in, I think it was in January, and he's played 9 or 10 games for Spurs. But in that time, he's got, 3, 4, 7 attacking returns, and he's been excellent at giving those excellent easy chances to Harry Kane, those 3 big chances created that Harry Kane's converted into goals. And look at the big chances created stat in the middle. Yeah. The orange bar connected, so compared to the best player for this stat in the entire game in the last 6, Bruno Fernandes, Kulu is like pretty much there. He's really, really comparing well to some of the best players in that stat, and the conversion is pretty good. He's going to rely on on Son or Kane to convert the big chances that he's going to create for his teammates, but they are world-class players. I wouldn't be worrying about the conversion aspect, but the fact that he has the ability to do that, I would be really skeptical about selling. I mean, the next fixture, Newcastle at home in game week 31. I think it's a little bit harsh, these stats at the bottom for Newcastle, because these are season-long stats. And so Newcastle was really bad at the start of the season. They've been really, really good since Eddie Howe's come in. So therefore, the stats are showing this is one of the best fixtures to target, but I think that's probably a little bit harsh on Newcastle. But nevertheless, after that, Aston Villa, a sort of middling team, Brighton a little bit better than Villa, Brentford a little bit worse, and then Leicester in game week 35. And then they have a poor potential double game week in 36 with, I think it's Liverpool and I can't remember what the other one is. It's probably like City or United or something.
No, they've got Arsenal. I think they've got Liverpool and Arsenal in 36.
Nice one.
Yeah.
I'm glad you're on top of things. But yeah, what do you think about Kulu? Is he a sell for you if you had him, or would you be tempted to keep him for the next 2 or 3 games?
I think he's almost a buy. So, like, I don't have Kulusevski in my team. I've got Son and Kane. And,
Nice.
that worked out really well for me in game week 30. But having a look at the stats, a few people in the chat are pointing out, look, he's 6.3. That is great value. He's created the most big chances, equal with Kane, I should say, of any player in the last 6 game weeks. So Kane and Kulusevski have created the most 5 big chances across the last 6 game weeks. And you've got that displayed there in the graphic. It's really obvious to see that Kulusevski creates some big chances and is creating them for guys like Harry Kane and Son, who love finishing these big chances. So it's not like Raphinha, who's creating big chances for Daniel James, for instance. Kulusevski's creating them for one of the best finishers in the world, in Kane and, of course, Son. And at his value at 6.3, I'm still considering making the downgrade from Son to Kulusevski. I'm not completely set on my transfers. We'll talk about that later, but you've already alluded to it so far in the stream, and I think right now managers are looking to get funds out of their midfielders and move it more into their defenders. We're looking again at Cancelo. We're looking at Trent and Robbo as a double up. We're thinking about how we can kind of get Reece James potentially back into our team. So if you've got Kulusevski at 6.3, who's delivering very similar statistics and FPL points to someone like Son at his price, yeah, I think I definitely wouldn't be selling Kulusevski, and I think he's definitely a hold, and for me, he's potentially even a buy.
A really good point. I think, sometimes we get caught up with double game week fever too much. And, obviously Burnley and Everton are doubling this week in game week 31. We'll look at the likes of Gordon and Weghorst later. Game week 33, the double in that. There's loads of teams, Newcastle, Leicester, all of these players that we want to get on. But also sometimes, in order to get those players, we have to sacrifice players like Kulusevski. And that might not be ideal when they're in form. Like, just to put this into perspective, he's played 8 games where he started since he joined Spurs. The first game he played 14 minutes. In those 8 games, he's got whatever it is, 3, 4, 7 attacking returns. That's almost 1 a game. That's an insane level of output for a 6.3 level million player. So, yeah, I kind of completely echo your thoughts. I think I'm probably going to look to keep as long as possible until the draw of double game weeks is too strong and I have to sacrifice a good player for a double game week player. But yeah, let's move on from Kulusevski and talk about someone who is particularly poignant at this time, and that's Harvey Barnes. So I think people might have brought him in from game week 30, but he's got Man United this week and a good double in game week 33. And also plenty of other potential double game weeks later on in the season, maybe 36 and even 37. So I've got the stats up here for Harvey Barnes. We're doing the same sort of graphic for each player. I think it's good. It shows the breakdown, what their strengths are, how they typically earn their FPL points. And you can see at the top here, Harvey Barnes, all matches this season, He's got 8 assists, only 3 goals. Those 8 assists are split between 4 big ones, 4 small ones. But the goals that he's scoring are all small chances. So I think that's very typical of Harvey Barnes. He tends to sort of cut in and shoot quite often. In the past, we've been frustrated that he's shot straight at the goalkeeper. That tends to be sort of cliche about Harvey Barnes. But in recent weeks, he's playing most minutes. He is doing that. In order to get the assist, he needs to have Vardy there, I think. So if Vardy's fit, that adds another string to his bow. But in terms of his goal potential, in the middle section, we're focusing on just the small chances, the shots that he's taking on goal, which are kind of outside the box. They're difficult opportunities. And you can see his stats are pretty decent. Like compared to Mo Salah for his price, what is he, 6.5 million, something like that. Compared to Salah's, 13 million, he is doing well and above what his, proportionate output should be. The problem is that the small chances only have a 5% conversion rate. And you can see that little white box on the left-hand side. Really, really small. I think that maybe it's one goal, something like that. So can we rely on Harvey Barnes for scoring that often if he continues to earn his points in the same way? I'm not so sure. So I think we would have to start relying on him unless he starts getting in the box and start putting tap-ins. But he hasn't scored a big chance this season, so I'm not sure we can expect that from him. So do we just rely on his assist points? Do we hope that Leicester start getting some attacking form and he can start assisting some decent... Or what do you think about him? He's obviously got the double game week in 33 against Newcastle and Everton, which is prime. But all of the other fixtures are difficult. Like Man United, yes, they've been conceding a little bit here and there. Palace are really difficult. Villa, Spurs, and then Everton in 36, arguably an easier one. But other than the double game week, are you that excited about Barnes?
Yeah, I think with Harvey Barnes, there's probably a bit of context that we need to understand when we're evaluating him as an FPL asset. So last season, you remember he went on that fantastic run around game week 15 to around game week 25 before he got injured. He scored a few goals in that time, and I think he was in a lot of FPL teams. He got injured. He missed the remainder of the season, and he missed a large chunk of the preseason as well for Leicester. And it's taken him quite a long time to get back to fitness. Recent comments from Brendan Rodgers around Harvey Barnes is that, he worked hard in the off-season. This is a player who had to watch his teammates lift the FA Cup, and he didn't get to participate in any of that. He's finally worked his way back to fitness now, and we're starting to see his form and his FPL returns pick up and almost return to where they were when he was peak in last season. But another thing we need to consider, and you've kind of mentioned it as well, is that Harvey Barnes is a player who likes to cut in and take shots from that wide kind of position inside the 18-yard box. So a lot of the chances, a lot of the goals that he's scoring are low chances or small chances because of the position that he likes to take his shots from. Raphinha, on the other hand, as a way of contrasting and comparing, he gets a lot of big chances. He's in those positions, but he's not always finishing, right? So a big chance and a small chance, they're kind of relative to the player and how the player performs. For example, Son, he gets quite a few small chances, but he's such an elite finisher that he will deliver on those small chances. So with Harvey Barnes, I think there's a bit of context there. For me, as a 6.5, 6.6 million asset, my expectations are a little tempered. I'm not thinking that he will deliver to the point of a Son or a KDB. But yeah, I think that what we've seen historically with Barnes is that he does offer decent assist and goal threat. And I think he's a really great pick. If you're free hitting in 33 or 36, or if you're not playing any chips, I think Harvey Barnes is a really great transfer because of the fixtures. And I think now that he's picking back up his fitness, and Leicester seem to be settled in that 4-2-3-1 formation now, instead of kind of 1 week playing 2 up top and the next week just playing 1. So I think he's playing in a more settled team. He's returned to fitness, and understanding the type of player he is, I'm not put off by those small chances.
Okay, that's completely fair. And I really like your point about the technical ability of the player compared to the type of chances they have, because certain players definitely have the ability to overperform whatever chance they have. Like Raphinha's prime example is that. So when it comes to Barnes, a lot of people might be tempted to go Maddison over Barnes, and we haven't got a graphic for Maddison, but his minutes are a little bit under suspect at the moment because for some reason he's got an injury niggle apparently. Would you be tempted to double up, or what are the advantages of Maddison over Barnes if you were just going to go for one player?
Yeah, look, I think Maddison, being on set pieces, we saw last week, he put that free kick into the top corner, incredible finish. Maddison over Barnes, the risk for Maddison is that his minutes aren't as guaranteed. I think that he's more prone to rotation, and there have been games where Maddison has been on the bench and the reason is not that clear. Even post-match, kind of Rodgers will chalk it down to, he felt unwell or there was a bit of a niggle or something. So I think if you do go for Maddison over Barnes, there's the risk of rotation. But in terms of double-digit returns, Maddison has had quite a few compared to Harvey Barnes this season. So I would say that Maddison's ceiling and his explosive potential is higher than Harvey Barnes. But there is the risk of rotation. There is the risk of missing out. And especially with the Europa Conference League and Leicester's ambitions in that league, perhaps the risk for Maddison is greater than the potential for him to be a little bit more explosive than Harvey Barnes. What are your thoughts on the Barnes versus Maddison kind of debate?
It's really, really difficult one. I would always, if I was going to just pick a player without any context about whether they've been injured or whatever, I would always choose Maddison. He's just a better player, in my opinion. He's got that ability to, as you say, double figure hauls, that sort of thing. But there's too much downside. There's too much contextual reasons why I can't go Maddison. I mean, the fact that they're still in Europe, as you've mentioned, the prime rotation stuff really sort of puts me off Leicester on the whole, even though they've got tons of double game weeks in the Premier League. So I'm not sure whether I'm going to go overboard on picking Leicester players, but definitely going to need one. And as you said, I think sort of Harvey Barnes is probably the most secure. He's younger, fitter, he's playing more minutes. He's probably got the highest floor out of all of the players who are in that attacking element of the Leicester side. Vardy isn't sure to play. Like their forwards, Iheanacho, I'm not sure I can consider him. Daka, not sure either. So he's probably the most obvious choice, and I might go there. But you could opt for other players. You could keep single game week players like Kulusevski, who arguably are a better option without the double game week. So it's really horses for courses for me and personal preference. If you're a sucker for double game weeks, I think he's an obvious pick. So
yeah. The double up feels like too much of a risk unless you're on a free hit though with Maddison and Barnes.
Yeah, for sure. And for people like me who probably won't free hit in 33, kind of puts me off. I'm certainly not going to look to bring in advance of game week 33. I think it will be game week 33 and then look to move him on at some point if I do go there. But I don't think I need to go there. I think focusing on Chelsea, Liverpool, City instead would be absolutely fine.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on from Leicester and Harvey Barnes and talk about a player who's sort of been out of the FPL sphere recently, and that's Jadon Sancho. He's I think about 8.9 million, something like that. I haven't got the prices up. I'm always guessing about what their prices are.
You're pretty close though. He's 8.9 million, and you haven't been far off for the rest of the guesses. So.
Well, it's a little mini game.
The Price is Right or something. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I must have picked it up somewhere, but yeah, 8.9 million. So it's on the steep side. Certainly when we're comparing him to the likes of these mid-priced players. But it has to be said that he is in a bit of form recently. Quite an even spread of the type of points that he's earning in terms of the big, small goals, assists, that sort of thing. But for me, when I watch him play, I'm going to expect that most of his goals from now until the rest of the season are going to be along the lines of big chances created, those big assists, as it were. which is why I've got the stat in the middle, which shows how good he's been in the last 6 compared to the best player, which is Bruno Fernandes in this category. Like almost equal to Bruno Fernandes' output for big chances created. Very, very similar to Kulusevski's stat, arguably a little bit better than Kulusevski. Now, Man United, of course, have got a double game week in 33, and that's why we're even considering Man United players at the moment, because otherwise, the erratic form that they're suffering, the low morale in the club, like the results really drive a lot of turmoil. But Norwich and Liverpool in 33, Liverpool less so, but Norwich is an absolutely fantastic fixture. And before that, we've got Leicester, who have been notoriously bad defensively this season, and Everton, equally so. Really, really rotten form. So the next 3 game weeks are prime for Jadon Sancho, in my opinion. And after game week 33, not so much. But the next 3 could be a short-term move, Ryan. Are you at all tempted, or is he a little bit too pricey?
Oh, I always want to be tempted by a Manchester United player. It's been a long time, though, since I've been able to indulge myself on that temptation. But with Jadon Sancho, I'm surprised actually to see how many big chances he's created and how close to Fernandes he gets. I think I've just always seen Fernandes and maybe Ronaldo as the only 2 assets from Manchester United. But Sancho is certainly making a case to be the 3rd in line. I was looking at some of his stats across the season, and you've been a big advocate for looking at how a player's statistics or expected data within a 6 game week period compares to the following game week period and see whether it kind of reverts to the mean. And Sancho is a great example of that, where in the first half of the season, he was underperforming on the statistics in terms of expected goal involvement. And I think it was the delta was something like a -2 for game weeks 1 all the way through to like game week 26 to 24. But across the last 6 game weeks, he's overperformed by +2. So if you kind of take that into account, he's hitting exactly what you would expect, or exactly what the statistics are telling us he should be getting this season. Now, is that going to continue, or is he going to revert to the -2 and pick up again? I'm not too sure. I am certainly tempted by a Manchester United player, and for me in game week 33, they're probably the best place to look for captaincy. And because I'm considering a game week 33 Manchester United player for captaincy, outside of a free hit, I just don't trust Sancho with the captaincy. I'd more likely trust Bruno Fernandes. So I am considering a United player, but for Sancho's, impressive form recently, I'm still leaning more towards Bruno.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think we have to consider Sancho because of that price point. He's saving sort of 3 or 4 million from Fernandes, and in a position in the season where our squads are pretty stretched at the moment. I'd say we all have pretty much 13 or 14 playing players because we've been bench boosting recently. A lot of people have. If you've still got your bench boost, you still need to build a 15-man squad. Whether you're going to do that with wildcard is another matter. But the funds are going to be stretched, nevertheless, across most of our squad. And to go Bruno Fernandes outside of a free hit, that's going to be pretty difficult to squeeze in the likes of Kane or Son, Fernandes and Salah. So we kind of have to, shop in the bargain basement aisle sometimes. And Sancho could be a decent option if you wanted to go there as a sort of upside pick, as a left field pick in preparation for game week 33. And this, of course, if you're not going to free hit in game week 33, I think this is something you have to consider. But if you are, then I would probably just be tempted to ignore him for the time being and just focus on the game week 33. But it has to be said, Leicester and Everton in the next 2 are decent fixtures.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that exact same question. So Leicester defensively have been quite poor this season, Everton as well. Would you go for a Manchester United midfielder like Sancho now if you're not free hitting in game week 33 and try and get something out of 31 and 32?
Yeah, it really depends. I haven't ruled it out by any means because I have some players to get rid of. And if I'm going to get rid of Coutinho, I could upgrade Coutinho by 1.5 million and get to Sancho. But it really depends on whether we want to go really, really big in defence, which I think is going to be a big template item. And we will talk about that later on in this stream. But it's that compromise. Do you go slightly bigger in midfield? Do you go Laporte over Cancelo and Rudiger over James and Matip over Robertson to enable that? Otherwise, you're going to go for the 6 million, 7 million options as opposed to the 8 or 9 million options. So very much depends on your taste, on your passion for the diversity in your squad. So yeah, but yeah, I think he's a good option, and definitely worth considering if you're not free hitting in 33. But let's move on to another guy who is also in that kind of price bracket. I'm going to guess at 7.8 million, Ryan.
You've nailed it. Nailed it.
Kai Havertz.
Wait, hang on. I thought you were talking about someone else. We need a price check on this. Oh, Ted, I'm so sorry. Point one out. One out.
7.9, is he?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Nearly there. But yeah, Kai, he's been in form recently. And most of those goals, I think he scored 3 in the last few games, have been big chances, big goals. And that is because he's playing false 9. I remember Gianni had a wonderful captain haul in game week 28 where he went against the grain and brought him in for that double game week against Burnley and Norwich. But yeah, that is the way that Kai is playing at the moment. He's sort of being that guy they're going to cross the ball into, they're going to cross the ball over, and he's gonna tap the ball in when it's just a one-on-one with the goalkeeper. So we're measuring the big chances here. He's got 4 big chance goals all season, but I think most of those have come recently. So that's why we're measuring that. The big chances in the middle compared to Harry Kane for the price is pretty reasonable, I'd say. And look at that conversion rate. The white box of the amount of big chances he's had. He's converting at a really, really high elite level. And that's just evidenced by the most recent goal he had, where I can't remember, was it Jorginho that crossed it over?
Yeah.
Really, really delicate touch and just passed it into the back of the net. Absolutely fantastic. And that just shows how much confidence he has at the moment. So he's someone I'm genuinely considering because from game week 31, Brentford, poor big chance stats. Southampton, we saw earlier with Raphinha, again, poor big chance stats. Arsenal gets a little bit difficult in game week 33. West Ham equally so, although these are season-long stats. I think West Ham have regressed a little bit. Game week 35, Everton really bad, and then Wolves again. So I think 3 out of the next 6 are really good for Kai, especially the next 2. Is he someone that you are considering for your team, Ryan?
Yeah, well, it's interesting to hear you talk about his conversion of big chances because it's not typically something I associate with Kai Havertz, his conversion of big chances. But you're right. Recently, he has started to kind of turn that around. And, I do remember that goal he scored against Newcastle. I lost my Dan Burn clean sheet, which was quite frustrating. But he looks to be, the focal point for the Chelsea attack. He looks to have got that starting position. I'm not sure how things will continue to work with Lukaku. I just don't think Lukaku can continue to be benched in the Premier League. Of course, they've got the Champions League. I just don't know how that's going to work out between the two of them and who's going to continue to start up top or whether Havertz might drop into midfield. But yeah, the fixtures are quite nice. We know that Chelsea will have a double game week in game week 36, I believe. And it's very likely they'll have one either side of that, depending on how they perform against Real Madrid in the Champions League. So he's got a lot of double game weeks to come. The fixtures will be fairly congested for Chelsea, which is a down kind of, we're not sure whether he'll play all of those matches. But you could, if you're daring, do a Sancho to Havertz switch after game week 33, but transfers are precious, right? With only a few game weeks to go. Havertz, he's not the profile of player that I would normally sign. Whilst I think recently we've seen him deliver and there's been some upside, you mentioned Gianni captained him. I just think that there's too many question marks around Havertz, not just with regards to his position in the team, but, Chelsea's fixture congestion. And for me, with transfers being so precious, I would prefer to target guys like Cancelo and Robertson, and even someone like a Phil Foden over a Havertz.
Really interesting. Yeah, I'm genuinely quite tempted, but it is quite a lot of money to spend in midfield. And as I sort of mentioned earlier, we have to choose between going big at the back or big in midfield because forward options are non-existent at the moment. We really have to choose one or the other, or hedging your bets and going sort of one big one in midfield and one big one at the back, rather than maybe two or three big at the back. So yeah, I'm very tempted. I have to say, and your point about Lukaku is really quite poignant. I really don't understand how Lukaku's been kept out. Maybe Tuchel just has a massive bee in his bonnet about Lukaku for some reason, and just wants to play him in the superfluous competitions like the cup and well, not the Champions League is superfluous, but
the cup. They're still in the FA Cup. They've got the semi-final coming up against Crystal Palace, of course.
Yeah, and maybe he just plays him in the Champions League as well. But yeah, for some reason he's not getting a looking in the Premier League, and Havertz is capitalising. So as long as that stays the same, I am tempted. But you're right, it is a consideration we have to make. But also, it could also be us FPL managers overthinking things and going, yeah, I'm going to overlook a decent player just because there's a possibility this might happen.
Yeah.
So if you've got a really strong feeling about that, then of course go with your hunch. But otherwise, I think Havertz is a pretty decent option for the next few weeks. And I think Chelsea have a decent double game week in 36 if you're not free hitting. Well, I mean, they don't. It's not confirmed, but it's projected that they will. But yes, you mentioned another chap in this price bracket, and I think this guy is 7.8 million. We'll talk about Phil Foden. Yeah. I should really know the prices, really, shouldn't I? But it's a fun game to play anyway. So once this transitions, yeah, we've got Mr. Phil Foden here, and I currently don't have any City players in my side. I'm not 100% sure about you, Ryan, but I'm kind of scared. They're going to Burnley in 31, and Foden seems like the cheapest option into that midfield or attack for City. We've got, let me just talk through the stats, like quite a wide spread of kind of returns that he's producing. More goals than assists, as you kind of expect. More small chance goals than big chance goals. But we're measuring the big chances because I think he's probably going to play that false nine, maybe more often than not. Hopefully those easy chances come to him. And he's been doing okay. For his price, 7.8 compared to Kane, the number of big chances has been okay. It's like decent. And he's converting them at a fairly poor rate, which is, I guess that's the worry about Foden, is that I think I spoke about this with Az on the title race video, but he hasn't done enough for me in terms of proving that he can score regularly. Even though he does all of these fantastic things on the pitch, like his touch is absolutely sublime. He shoots often as well, but is he converting as often as he displays these awesome things he's doing on the pitch? Not for me. And that conversion graphic there, the little white box to the left of Foden's name, just shows that he's been converting big chances fairly poorly. Just to reiterate, big chances should be converted at around the 50% mark. So they're going to score one of every two big chances they have. He's been doing that, one in every three, one in every four? That's kind of poor. Does that put you off at all? Or does that even matter in this Man City side? Like, he's going to get amongst the points if they start scoring loads of goals again.
Yeah, no, it does. It certainly is a concern. I mean, in the last 6 game weeks, he's created 0 big chances. And as you've already mentioned, he's missed 3 big chances in the last 6 game weeks. And that gold bar, that yellow bar in the middle there, I'd much prefer to see that a lot closer to Kane. And we've already compared several players already in this stream whose conversion rate is a lot higher than Foden's. Being in that Man City team, he will continue to get big chances, but if he's not putting them away, then that is a concern. 7.8, the price is quite enticing though. As you've mentioned, if we are looking to move to this big at the back kind of template, then we need to make sacrifices in midfield and up front. And at 7.8, he's a lot easier to get to than a KDB or even someone like a Mahrez, for example. But yeah, like the poor conversion rate, it is a concern. although the fixtures, look at that Watford fixture there, and then he's got Leeds, Newcastle. There's a double game week in there for City. I don't have any City players, just like you, Ted. And I'm really scared looking at those fixtures. So, yeah, look, at the moment, I'm not going to rush to buy Foden. But for my team structure, he's probably the easiest player to bring in. And so I'm hoping that he'll start to put away some of those big chances, which he's already done for periods this season. We know that he can put the big chances away. Right now, he's struggling to do so, but I'm hoping that the volume will continue to increase with those fixtures. And if you throw enough mud at the wall, hopefully some of it sticks, right?
Very true. Yeah, and to completely echo your thoughts about game week 34 onwards, he almost becomes a priority transfer for me. Like Watford, Leeds, Newcastle, and they potentially have 2 double game weeks in 36 and 37. So I'm not going to go without a City player. I'm not going to go without an attacking City player from game week 34 onwards. I need someone in. And I kind of like Havertz for that reason, because he's a nice price point to go maybe the next 3 weeks and then drop down to Foden, who's 0.1 cheaper. He might be the same price by the end of it. So price point movements, that's something to consider for sure. You could say the same thing about Sancho dropping down to Foden after game week 33. Actually, Sancho to Foden would be an even more lovely transfer because you're utilising that double game week in 33. But from game week 34 onwards, as we've been saying, blimey, yeah, I sort of need this guy. I need this guy.
Yeah, this has been so interesting for me because I've come into this stream truthfully thinking, okay, my priority transfers are in defence. I need Robbo, I need Cancelo, I need these guys in. But these statistics and the graphs that you're putting forward here, it's really persuasive to start thinking about, well, what is the priority for my team? Is it moving towards the big at the back template, or, am I neglecting to kind of jump on Havertz and Sancho and then use that as a gateway to a Phil Foden, for example, when City's fixtures look really nice. So, yeah, this has been great food for thought for me and hopefully for people in the chat to think about. Maybe we're actually overlooking some of these guys.
It's food for thought for me as well. Like, I create these graphics, just because they're poignant players. But when you actually analyse it, you talk through it with other people, you go, blimey, right. How am I possibly going to get in Robertson, James, Cancelo, as well as Trent, and then be able to afford these guys who have periods of 3 or 4 fixtures where you're going, I'll be really scared to go without this guy. So, as always, we go throughout the season in FPL with trends towards a certain position. I think the trend at the moment is going big at the back, and we will cover that towards the end of the stream. But I think the point we're both making, Ryan, is don't overlook some of these key guys in midfield who are going to be particularly hot property in certain 3 or 4 game weeks. So yeah, really, really, really interesting. Let's talk about another of the Man City guys who is a little bit more expensive, but could be a decent differential almost in Mr. Kevin De Bruyne. And God, this is going to be more difficult to guess his price, I think. He's about 11.8, 11.9, something like that.
Let's see. De Bruyne, where are you? 11.8, 11.9. Oh, 11.7.
In the right ballpark. 11.7, he's not a bad price for De Bruyne. Now, the thing that really surprises me about him is when you look at that distribution of points he's got, the distribution of returns, how on earth would anyone have guessed that he's only got 3 assists this season? That surprised me so much. Like, all of his points basically have come from small chance goals, like shots from difficult areas. And we know he's got a fantastic strike on him, like shoots from outside the box. It doesn't really matter where he shoots from. As long as it's on target, it's going to test the goalkeeper absolutely massively. He's scored 8 of those goals this season. That's, like 70-80% of his points have come from those. So we're looking at the small chances for De Bruyne, and you can see that the conversion is low, as expected. The conversion for small chances is about 5% for the average player. And you compare those amount of small chances to Salah. Is he actually providing that much value for money in that category? I'm not 100% sure, especially when you have Foden 3 or 4 million cheaper. But nevertheless, when you look at the the stats for their opponents, and these stats would be different to Foden's because we're looking at small chances here for De Bruyne rather than big chances. Burnley are really, really bad at conceding tons and tons of small chances. So maybe he has a chance there, but then you go to Liverpool and that's just completely the reverse. Brighton are particularly good at conceding, are not particularly good at conceding, which is good for their defensive record. But then, as we sort of speak, from game week 34 onwards, that's when the real trouble strikes, and we go, right, how many Man City players can we squeeze in our team as much as possible? But the problem is, as we've been talking about, Ryan, how do we squeeze all of these players in? And we were having trouble squeezing in 7 or 8 million players. How on earth do we squeeze in an 11.7 million player?
Yeah, with great difficulty. I just don't think that you can have Salah, Kane, and Kevin De Bruyne in the same team without sacrificing something at the back or even going dirt cheap in midfield. Yeah, Kevin De Bruyne, I mean, if Man City is still in the title race, he's one player that you can pretty much will guarantee will play every minute. We have seen him rotated when the Champions League has come up in recent seasons, but that's often come at a time when the title race has already been decided. And with City obviously so close in the league to Liverpool, I just don't see how Pep will rotate his best player for those key matches. So, you're buying Kevin De Bruyne at 11.7, and you know that he will be playing, which is great news. But I just think that you're having to sacrifice too much elsewhere. And 3 assists so far this season, that stat completely shocked me. No way. Kevin De Bruyne has only registered 3 assists so far this season. When you think about his season, he's just been taking a lot of shots from outside the box, right? Like, if I think about De Bruyne's highlight reel this season, there've been some great shots, but most of them just coming outside the box.
Yeah, it sort of makes me wonder about how this Man City team are playing recently. They haven't been scoring those 4 or 5 goals that we typically expect from them. It's sort of been 1 or 2-0 wins recently, and that is probably the biggest element that puts me off De Bruyne, because if they're not scoring that many goals, then there's super limited opportunity for De Bruyne to get assists. And the fact that he's only got 3 this season is just, completely compounding the fact that there's not that much opportunity anymore, it seems. Maybe he's been injured at the wrong times where they've had these really, really good fixtures. But compared to the likes of Salah, the value that you get from Mo Salah at the moment, I'd be much rather spending 13 million on Salah rather than 11.7 on De Bruyne. And even Fernandes is better, and Harry Kane and Son. So I think you can get better value at City with the likes of in defence and Foden and even Mahrez if you wanted to try and play Pep Roulette. But yeah, De Bruyne is definitely an upside chase for me, but he's certainly not the most obvious pick at all. So yeah. So yeah, we've been talking about how to fit all of these players in our side. But how are we going to do that? And we need some enablers, Ryan. We need to talk about some cheaper options in midfield. And the first one we're going to start with is Anthony Gordon at Everton, who is going to be quite a popular pick this week, I think, because Everton have a double game week against West Ham and Burnley in game week 31. 2 reasonable fixtures. Gordon has 5 attacking returns this season, so not great, but for 4.5 million, pretty sure that's the right price. You can check it for me, but I think it's right. His small chance stats compared to Mo Salah, considering his price, are fairly reasonable. So he's a third of the price basically, and he's shooting more than a third than Salah is. So the only issue is, again, most of his points have come from small chances. The conversion rate for small chances is low, and from a guy with a young age with lots of talent at 4.5 million in FPL. Can we expect him to score too many of those now until the end of the season? Not so sure. And similar vein to De Bruyne, if Everton aren't scoring that many goals, that also limits his assist potential as well. So the fixtures after the double in game week 31, Man United with some fairly poor defensive stats, Leicester even more poor. But then after that, we've got Liverpool, Chelsea, and Leicester. Leicester being fairly poor as well. So if you look at those fixtures on paper after game week 31, you would go, hell no, I'm staying away from this guy. You know, United, Leicester, Liverpool, Chelsea, and Leicester again. Those are some tough fixtures on paper, but clutching at straws here, Man United and playing Leicester twice might not be so bad as it may seem on paper. Not so sure you'd be playing him anyway in those fixtures, but from game week 31, he seems like a decent option to try and enable the squad around you. I think you own Gordon, Ryan.
Yeah, I do. He's in my team. And look, I brought him in for that reason, as a budget enabler, knowing that Everton have quite a few games to rearrange. They've got obviously the double in game week 31, and they will have quite a few more doubles to come as well before the end of the season. So, you know, look, in terms of a budget enabler, I think Gordon is probably the best of the 4.5, you know, bargain basement if you're shopping down in that section. But it feels like, unless you're on a wild card, it feels like a bit of a wasted transfer. Like if you've got 8 or 9 free transfers to use between now and the end of the season, and one of those free transfers is spent on freeing up $1 million or $2 million, you know, bringing Anthony Gordon into your team, it feels like that's a bit of a wasted transfer. That's more of a move you make on a wild card, or a move that you make earlier in the season. We need to maximize our transfers now. And so, yeah, I definitely get the appeal. I like having him in my team because he does free up funds for me, but I brought him in on the wild card, knowing that Everton had the fixtures. And I think if you do want to go for Gordon, getting him this game week with a double, I think it's a perfectly fine move. But beyond that, I wouldn't be looking to get Gordon into the team because, yeah, look, United and Leicester, those two teams defensively haven't been so great, but with only 8 or 9 free transfers left before the end of the season, spending one of those precious transfers on a 4.5 million Gordon just doesn't feel right.
No, now you said that, it's really difficult because if you bring in someone like Gordon at 4.5, you almost have to ensure that you're going to have at least 2 strikers that you're going to play week in, week out, because you're removing that 5th midfield option, which is pretty valuable. I think, you know, the current template is, you know, 5 in midfield because there's so much value there at the moment. Removing one of those players and moving it up front or maybe to the back means that you're going to be playing 5-4-1 or even 4-4-2. So the problem is with the forwards at the moment, there aren't too many obvious ones. We're going to talk about Weghorst in a minute, but Harry Kane seems like the obvious one. Lacazette is in a scattering of squads. But other than that, not too many options. So really depends on your squad. But I think as a short-term move, bringing in Gordon right now, I would probably refrain from it, to be completely honest.
Yeah. That's a great point about your squad structure and just understanding how removing a 5th midfielder, what that does to the rest of your team. That's a really good point.
Okay, so as an alternative to Gordon, let's talk about someone else who is a Newcastle midfielder, 5.3 million, I think he is. And this is a Mr. Ryan Fraser, who lost his place against Chelsea in their most recent Premier League game. But it doesn't put me off too much. I think probably Eddie Howe just changed it up to make that squad more solidified. He did a pretty good job at preventing Chelsea from getting in behind. It was a last-minute winner from Kai Havertz that put them to the sword. But I don't think Fraser suited that game. I think Newcastle typically play 4-3-3 at the moment, with Fraser on that left wing. In games that are accessible to them, I think he plays pretty much every game. So against Spurs, Wolves, and the double game week, Leicester and Palace, I don't think there's any reason why he doesn't play. So looking at his stats, 4 small chance assists is where most of his points have come from. And that's kind of evidenced by his crossing into the box. I think he assisted like Joe Linton the other week, assisted Chris Wood, headers in the box that have been sort of difficult ones to get onto. But nevertheless, he's got a good delivery. Those small chance assists might be a little bit harsh on the representation of the stats here. So I think he's a decent player. Look at the small chances created in the middle, the orange bar, compared to the player with the best stat in that category, which is Trent Alexander-Arnold. Fraser is doing an admirable job for 5.3 million compared to Trent's 8 million, I think he is, or 8.3 million or whatever. Providing quite a lot of value for such a cheap asset. And he has a double in 33, unlike Gordon, who has his double in 31. So you could use Fraser as a make weight to try and get the perfect squad for game week 33 instead of Anthony Gordon. I think he's a decent option at that price point.
Yeah, for sure. I think Ryan Fraser, it's great to see him performing well again in the Premier League. I remember, him fondly when he was at Bournemouth and playing well again under Eddie Howe. For me, Fraser feels more like a free hit 33 option rather than a transfer in. You've got Spurs and Wolves in the next two fixtures, two fairly difficult defences, and you've got there on the screen that they don't concede too many small chances. So Fraser is, I think he's more of an option if you're free hitting in 33. He's got that nice fixture against Norwich in 34, but then Liverpool and then City in the two fixtures after that. If you bring Ryan Fraser in, it feels like that's just another transfer you're booking in down the line. And again, we're talking about just understanding the context of the season, where we're at. You don't want to really bring a player in right now that you're going to have to transfer out in a couple of game weeks. I mean, we have spoken about Havertz and Sancho, but the upside is really there for those guys. With someone like a Ryan Fraser, bring him in for 3 game weeks, only to transfer him out, that might mean you miss out on a Cancelo, or you miss out on a Robbo, or you miss out on a Phil Foden, for example, because you're having to make that extra transfer, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. He's almost certainly not a transfer that I want to make, but he's a transfer that might be necessary to enable having the certain players that I want in certain game weeks. And I think what you're saying about like a free hit in 33, absolutely. Like if you want to enable the players in that squad, then absolutely fine. But also, I think if you're not free hitting in 33 and want a player for maybe 1 or 2 game weeks to enable some moves, Norwich in 34 is not the worst fixture. So game week 33 and 34 might be the time to bring him in if you want to maximise your opportunity in those weeks. We've got the stats at the bottom for the opponents. We're looking at crosses conceded, and in particular, the white box represents the crosses conceded in the right zone, which is he plays on the left. So Norwich particularly bad, conceding plenty of crosses as you should expect, but actually Wolves are equally bad. Which surprised me a little bit. So maybe Wolves isn't a particularly bad fixture for Fraser, even though they're fairly good at defending and keeping clean sheets. So, he's not the worst transfer. And I know we're dwelling on Fraser probably too much, but he's got a decent double in 33. If you want some key players, he's probably the way to go if instead of Anthony Gordon. I think that's the point we're trying to make.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to a very, very key player. And there's someone in the chat asking me to talk about Weghorst. Well, now is the opportunity. We can talk about Weghorst. And this is like the biggest dilemma for me this season. Sorry, not this season, this week. So I've got his stats up. They're pretty atrocious, it has to be said. Like when we talk about Weghorst, I'm expecting him to start scoring headers. I'm expecting him to start scoring big chances. He's only got 1 goal this season, which was a shot, which was fairly difficult to convert. I think it was near post. I can't remember who it was. He's got 2 assists, 1 goal. That's it. No big chances scored. And his big chances stats are terrible when you compare to the highest player in the league, which is Harry Kane. But for 6.5, which is half what Harry Kane is, it's just dire. The problem is that Burnley have a prospective three double game weeks in the next 4 or 5 weeks, and that is where you're maximising the points with Burnley. So I think this isn't really unexpected from people's perspective that you're bringing in a player who isn't really doing much, but he's potentially got 3 double game weeks, and those appearance points stack up. So is he worth just going for without any expectation, and anything he does above that is just a bonus?
Yeah, certainly. I think so. You're right. Like just the appearance points alone means that he's probably getting a minimum of 4 points in the double game weeks to come. And forwards, apart from Harry Kane, haven't been delivering in recent weeks or really across the whole season. So there's every chance that his 4 appearance points will outscore the likes of, well, definitely outscore the likes of Jimenez, but outscore the likes of Lacazette potentially, or Calvert-Lewin, or Ivan Toney, or even like a Che Adams. So, yeah, I think it depends on the current state of your team. If you've got Jimenez in your team, I think it's a real easy transfer straight to Weghorst. Burnley are a team that are fighting to try and stay in the Premier League. So just understanding that at this stage of the season, teams down the bottom, we have seen historically that, they can deliver some surprising performances and results. If Burnley are going to do anything, it's very likely that Weghorst will be a part of that. Only 1 goal so far this season. We're not expecting too much, but for his price, I think you can afford to have a Harry Kane plus a Weghorst and then redistribute funds. I think he's a friendly price with some double game weeks coming up. And yeah, I think that the floor, I should say, is high enough that it warrants going there at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, funnily enough, I'm in exactly that position. I have Jimenez to get rid of. And I really don't want Weghorst, but I kind of have to get him. And I'm reluctant to do so. But it is what it is. The problem is that, particularly for my squad, sorry to be self-indulgent, but I've got Lacazette, Kane, and Jimenez. So if I move Jimenez down to Weghorst, I kind of have to play like a 3-4-3 or something like that. So it's quite a lot of money up front, and I'm kind of a bit reluctant to do it. Like, the other option is to move Jimenez down to a 4.5 option instead and get more in midfield. That is an option for people to consider. You don't have to go Weghorst, even though there's lots of double game weeks, and the appearance points are enough to tempt you in that. I mean, he probably will get an assist or a goal here or there, but the stats are not projecting that he will do that, especially against some of the tougher opposition. He plays Man City in the double in 31. But yeah, it's a really difficult one. I think this is a really tough dilemma, and it really depends on your team structure as well. So at the moment, my planned transfers are to bring him in reluctantly, but 6.5 million when you could spend 7-8 million on a much better midfielder, try and enable that instead. That sounds a little bit better to me, but I don't know. It's really tough.
Yeah. I don't think I would bring Weghorst in if it was for a hit, because for him, with the projection so low, if he scores a goal, and that's a big if, that's the hit kind of taking the goal out of the equation straight away. It's more of a transfer you can make for free. So if anyone's thinking about Weghorst in for a hit, I would advise against it, just because it negates the advantage of the double game week then. But yeah, you're right. If you do bring him into your team, it might have implications for the structure of your team and the formation you're playing moving forward. Because, if you've got a Kane or a Lacazette, and as you've said, you've got Jimenez, and lots of other managers have Jimenez too, and they bring in Weghorst, they're kind of sticking to the 3 up front. And what does that mean for, are you able to get Cancelo, Reece James, Robbo, Havertz, the other players that we've spoken about so far in this stream? I think it's worth considering the long-term implications of bringing Weghorst in, not just getting sucked in by he's got a double game week this week.
Yeah, really difficult one, and whatever you choose, good luck with it. But I'm really unsure myself, and that's something I really need to consider, like weighing up all of the midfield options, all of the defensive options, and seeing whether I actually need Weghorst to enable those. But yeah, we've been not talking about the defence, so it's time to change that. Let's end the last 3 players we're going to talk about with some premium defenders, and we're going to start with a Man City chap called Mr. Cancelo, and a really interesting one, because I think a lot of people say, "Oh yeah, you've got to have Cancelo." 6.9 million is quite a lot to pay for a defender, but is he justifying that price tag? And if we've got the attacking stats here for City, for Cancelo, and it kind of surprised me that most of his attacking points were coming from small assists, the 6 small assists on the left-hand side, not creating too many big opportunities for his City teammates. And, you know, maybe City are just so talented that they don't need to be given a goal on a platter, on a silver platter, to pop in the back of the net. And maybe they just have so much possession and create so many chances that he's just going to be naturally involved. That's something to be said. But when you see Cancelo play, he shoots a hell of a lot, incredibly so in the recent weeks. The small chances that he has is absolutely fantastic for a defender. But it might shock you to note that he's only scored one of those this season. He's only got one goal this season, and that's been a small chance. But when you compare that stat to Salah, it's absolutely phenomenal. The amount of shots that he's having is absolutely stunning compared to a 13 million best player in the world player in Mo Salah. I can't just emphasize how impressive that is. The only downside is that he hasn't scored any of those chances in the last 6. And when we talk about small chances, we've been saying this throughout the stream, it's only a 5% conversion. So you can expect a small little white box next to that yellow bar. But maybe Cancelo doesn't have it in him to even get to that 5%. And maybe it's just a big red herring that we're seeing in hugely impressive stats from Cancelo. When you watch him play, you go, wow, I need to have this player. But is he actually worth 6.9 million when you compare him to the likes of Trent and Robbo, who are creating tons and tons of really decent opportunities for their teammates? It doesn't seem like Cancelo is doing that.
Yeah, it's a good point with Cancelo. I mean, he's a bit cheaper than Robbo and a lot cheaper than Trent. But with the Man City defence, he almost starts on a clean sheet. And with the chance creation and the way the bonus points kind of work and the fact that City just aren't scoring too many goals right now, he almost starts on 1 or 2 bonus points as well, right? So looking at the double-digit returns for all outfield players so far this season, Cancelo has had 6 double-digit returns, which is equal 3rd most in the league. He's only behind Salah and Trent. So Cancelo there, whilst he might not be scoring too many goals and he might not be getting too many assists, the fact that he's starting on a clean sheet most weeks with City's defence being so strong and the bonus points being so favourable to wing-backs, particularly wing-backs like Cancelo, I think all he needs is 1 assist, or all he needs is a couple of extra points from somewhere, and that will give him a double-digit return. And with the fixtures that City have to come at 6.9, I'm not fazed by that at all. Cancelo is a big priority for me to bring in. Look, the stats he hasn't delivered so much on the stats, but City's defence collectively has been so strong, and I think Cancelo will he'll do well for the remainder of the season.
I really like the alternative opinion, because that's kind of what I was trying to play devil's advocate at the start here. Because yes, of course, it's not always about attacking returns for defenders. The fact that he is so attacking, the fact that he is so involved in the attacking play also pays dividend when it comes to the bonus system. And so if City keep a clean sheet, he is almost certainly going to be up in the bonus system rankings. And that is why more often than not, he does get 2 or 3 bonus points when they keep a clean sheet. And that adds up. That really does add up. He doesn't necessarily have to have the attacking returns. So yes, he's an excellent player. It remains to be seen whether you can go for an alternative Man City defender in Laporte. I think Stone's got an injury during the international, so that kind of secures Laporte's spot even more, even though it was already kind of nailed. So Laporte at 5.8 million, I think he is, compared to Cancelo at 6.9. Laporte's got some attacking threat as well. Do you think that saving a little bit of money with Laporte is justified, or would you just always go for Cancelo?
Yeah, that's a great question, because if Cancelo's not necessarily getting the attacking returns, then the clean sheet points for Cancelo is the same clean sheet points for Laporte, right? And we know that Pep Guardiola, possession-based managers like to have that left-footed centre-back playing on that left side. So Laporte is integral to the way City like to play. And with John Stones potentially being out now, that only reinforces the fact that, it looks to be Diaz and Laporte nailed on in the City defence. I want triple City. And so the question isn't Cancelo or Laporte for me. It's Cancelo and Laporte plus which midfielder. Because I think that with so many managers having at least one of Cancelo and Laporte, you're not getting too much from the Man City clean sheet. So you need to think about, well, how are you getting an advantage on your rivals, and potentially having Laporte and Cancelo is the way to do that.
Goodness me, you want triple City? How on earth are you going to fit in triple Liverpool, double Chelsea, triple City, Arsenal and Spurs into your squad? Goodness me.
Yeah.
I've got Reece James up on the screen. We've just moved to him. He is another asset that you've got to consider in your team. So who are you going without if you're going to go for Trent, Cancelo, Laporte? You've only got two other options. You can go Reece James or Rudiger, Robertson. Who do you miss out of those sort of 5 or 6 players?
Yeah, wow, that's a great question. I mean, of course, it depends on your own team and how do you prioritize getting them in based on the funds that you've got available and the players you've already got in position. Reece James, he is so explosive. I captained him for his 18 points in the double game week. You did as well, Ted. I remember.
We did the deadline stream together in advance of that. That was a
great.
That was a lovely moment. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so nice to be able to text each other later and be like, "Hey man, how good was that? Did you get reached?" So he is explosive, and we know that he has the potential to get some really big returns. But with the fixtures to come and the congestion with Champions League, the FA Cup as well, Chelsea is still in. They've got Palace in the semi-final. You'd probably expect them to get through to the final. Tuchel now has a player on his hands who has just returned from injury, played in a couple of matches. If you remember, he played more than I think Tuchel wanted him to play in a particular cup match that went to extra time. And Tuchel was kind of saying that we had him locked in for 20 odd minutes or whatever it was, and ended up playing 70 or 75. So you have to think that Tuchel is going to be cautious with Reece James and his return. With the World Cup as well for England coming up, he doesn't want to risk a potential serious injury there. He's going to have to be eased back into the team. Yeah, Reece James, he's a great asset, but I think I'm probably going to be adopting a more cautious approach, bringing him back into my team. I think I'll wait to see him play a couple of matches first. And I know it's risky, but yeah, with his injury record, I just don't know if I can jump in from the start. What are your thoughts on Reece James?
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear you say that, because I'm sure it would echo a lot of FPL managers' thoughts. The really interesting situation we have with Reece James, he is the most obvious, world-class, cheaper defender at 6.2 million. He's not the 7 or 8 millions that Trent and Robbo costs. But he's going to go under the radar slightly because of people's reticence to get him in, because of this injury doubt. So if there's any inclination that he might be fit to start the next few matches, I think there's huge upside to be gained by getting him in, as it was in game week 28, when we weren't 100% sure whether he was going to play both games. Yes, we know we didn't play both games, but in that one game, he got 18 points. If he's going to start out of the next, 1 or 2 games where he has Brentford and Southampton, both with particularly poor stats over the season, plenty of crosses conceded in their left-hand zone, which is where Reece James operates for Chelsea on the right-hand side. So plenty of opportunity for James to get attacking points there if he's fit. And that if he's fit thing is the main barrier here. People are going to be brave and bring him in. And if he just starts, then people are going to be fearing him.
Yeah, it sounds like, it feels like a really, we're standing on the precipice of, this incredible kind of decision that we've got, right? With Robbo or James or Cancelo, like, and we're all kind of thinking about which way do we go. And in 7 or 8 game weeks, we'll look back and the answer will be clear. And those managers that went James or those managers went with Cancelo will be the victors. Yeah, it just feels like a really unique moment in the season where we've got this open kind of slather of options. You know, the kind of all-you-can-eat buffet is almost ready to go. And where do you choose to dip in, and where do you choose to kind of forsake? I think that'll be it's going to be a really interesting final kind of run into the end of the season.
It's really. It's a really good point. We've got all of these teams that we kind of want back. Like, we've been neglecting City of late. We've been neglecting Chelsea to a certain extent. Our main focus has been on Spurs and Arsenal. But now we want all of these top 6 teams in our squads. You're going to have to compromise somewhere. So this is a big choice. There's lots of points to be had in the next few weeks until the end of the season. Really difficult. I think, like, going back to James, he is going to be an absolute staple in the FPL sides once he gets fit again. I just fingers crossed that he's fit from game week 31, because we can just all jump on him and reap the rewards. Well, let's move on from Reece James and talk about the last player. We can talk about Andrew Robertson, but I just want viewers to keep their eye on the big chances created tab for Reece James. Like, just have a look at that, because when you compare him to Bruno Fernandes, he's absolutely sensational. But I've got the same stat for Andrew Robertson. Just keep in mind how it looks for Reece James, and we'll see how it looks for Andrew Robertson. So once it transitions, taking a little bit of time today for some reason. Don't know whether my computer's being a bit slow.
You've built the suspense so well. I can't wait for this.
Okay, so Andrew Robertson, you would expect, I think, to have a better big chances created stat than Reece James. But Reece James blows him out of the water in terms of amount of big chances he's creating. But the only thing, when you look at Robertson, is the big white box encompassing all of his big chances created, which means he has a 100% conversion rate for big chances created in the last 6. That is not sustainable, even for world-class players like Salah or Mane or whoever. So all of the big chances he's created for his teammates in the last 6 have been converted. They've all been converted, which I'm looking through the statistical goggles with a bit of rose-tinted shine to them, because maybe he's showing that he's being a bit better than maybe what will happen in the future. And that kind of moves my attention to Reece James a little bit more in terms of an attacking presence, particularly as he's 1 million cheaper. Yes, caveat is if Reece James is fit. If Reece James is fit, I'm 100% going Reece James over Andrew Robertson, particularly that Liverpool have Man City in game week 32. But pretty scary to go without, especially with Watford in game week 31. So if you had to compare those 3 players, Ryan, Cancelo, James and Robertson, and assuming that you don't own any of them, rank them in order of preference, what would it be?
That is the $1 million question. I'm trying to decide that, looking at all the data that you've presented. Robbo's, the conversion of the big chances he's created is a complete shock. And also comparing the amount of big chances Robbo's created compared to someone like Reece James. Yeah, that's been really interesting as well. I think it's clear that Robbo and James have more attacking upside than a Cancelo. But Cancelo is playing for the best defence in the league. And with the double-digit returns, he's only bettered by Trent from a defensive point of view. So Cancelo, whilst he probably lacks the attacking returns of Robbo and Reece James, he makes up for that in the base of the clean sheets and the bonus points that he's getting. So ranking them is really difficult. I think I would probably put Cancelo as my number 1. I would have Reece James as number 2 and then Robbo as my 3rd. There's not much to split them. The price is a factor, and Robbo is the most expensive out of the 3. But I think with Cancelo, you're getting the Man City clean sheet you're getting the bonus points as well. Reece James, if he's fit, let's assume that he returns to fitness from game week 31, 32. I think Reece James is, his explosive potential, his ceiling is a lot higher, I would say, than the other two players. And so, yeah, I would put Reece James as number 2 and then Robbo as a close third. But it's a tough question, Ted. I'm
really
intrigued to hear what do you think about that? How would you rank them?
It's really interesting how you think about it, because there's different pros, there's different cons to all three players. And if you value security, you value minutes, you value repetition and ability to sustain those points, Cancelo definitely is a really decent option. But you're right, he doesn't have that attacking prowess that Reece James and Robertson do. So I think I would go Reece James as my top transfer option, and then Robertson, and then Cancelo, because I think you could just about get away with compromising and going Laporte over Cancelo, whereas compromising with the other two, I think, is a bigger gap to fill. And it's a good segue, actually, because we're gonna look at all of the players we've just discussed, pop them on a single chart and see how they compare to each other in the usual way, the typical graphic that we have on TED Talks, and just see like who are the priorities here. In the meantime, Matthew Price says, if you've liked the stream, give it a thumbs up, and if you've not subscribed, hit that subscribe button. Thank you, Matthew, very much. Lots of effort has gone into this stream, so fingers crossed you've enjoyed it and got some use from it. Also, to address the pronunciation police earlier, yes, I'm sorry I pronounced it how Cancelo. It's Joao Cancelo, yes. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. Forgive me, but hopefully that sorts it out. Right, we've got the graphic up here, and these are the 14 players we've talked about in the stream. I will comment and make sure that all of the timestamps are up after the stream for each of the individual players. So if you're interested in one individual player, you can skip towards that guy. But yeah, we've got the small attempts, which the small attempts are the combined small chances and small chances created, and then the big attempts are the big chances and big chances created. So it's a whole big small comparison. We've got Jadon Sancho at the top there, which might surprise you actually for big attempts per appearance, and we've got Kevin De Bruyne on the right hand side for small attempts. But as we sort of discussed in this stream, Kevin De Bruyne doesn't seem like he's proving that much value for money at the moment. Kulusevski and Havertz, Reece James, all at the top there, followed by Foden, Raphinha, Harvey Barnes, and Coutinho. Two players that we're looking to get rid of there, Raphinha and Coutinho. Bear that in mind. Then it's followed below by Robertson, and then Fraser, Anthony Gordon, Weghorst, and then last, with 0 big attempts, Cancelo. But we've already sort of talked about that recently, about Cancelo's attacking threat. You're not necessarily buying him for that attacking threat, more that he's an absolute bonus point magnet. But so what sticks out for you, Ryan, on that chart in terms of like priorities for you? Does it nail any sort of inclinations that you've had throughout the stream?
Yeah, well, what it does is it tells me that the question you asked just before about how would I rank Reece James, Robertson, and Cancelo is it tells me that you've got some data here to back up your answer with having Reece James as number 1. I think I didn't really expect to see him so high there in terms of his big attempts, and big chances compared to the rest of the defenders. And like he's kind of on par with Havertz and above Kulusevski and Foden. And this is a defender we're talking about. So
it's really interesting, isn't it? Because sorry to interrupt you. The thing about Reece James is he is probably the best defender for scoring goals that isn't from like a headed set piece. Like you've got Craig Dawson's of this world, Ben Mee, all that sort of stuff. Reece James is like a genuine winger sometimes. And obviously he scored his goal in game week 28, which was absolutely fantastic. It was like a Mo Salah, like twisted and turned left and right and then slotted it into the bottom left corner. But that is also a string to his bow on top of all of the chances he creates for his teammates. So this is why I think he's an absolute priority for me if he's fit. I hate to say those 3 words, if he's fit, but if there's any inclination, I would just be tempted to go early and get some upside. Even if he plays 30, 40 minutes, maybe one game. I still think there's some upside without the clean sheet potential there. So yeah, for me, I'm going to keep hold of Kulusevski for as long as I can. Raphinha for the next 2 games. I think probably Coutinho's on the shopping block, but moving to Harvey Barnes, not 100% sure whether that's an immediate concern. I'm going to have to start thinking about which Man City players to get in our teams, which Chelsea players to get in our teams. We haven't talked about Mason Mount, of course, but I think probably Havertz for a very similar price, is a better option at the moment. The thing that really... Sorry, go on.
Oh, no, sorry. You were about to say something.
No. I've been dominating the chat. You go for it.
Well, it's just great to have a look at the numbers above the names and below the names. So the big returns and the small returns. Harvey Barnes, we've mentioned that he's a player who has probably more small chances than big chances, and his assist threat has been greater than his goal threat so far this season, and that's reflected in the returns. He's offering more small returns than big returns. Yeah. And so it kind of tells me that, look, if we do have limited transfers remaining, you want to maximize your transfers. You want to make sure that you're getting players in who have the potential to deliver with some big returns. Yeah. And so I'm looking at Havertz and Sancho there, and I'm thinking that perhaps Havertz is the way to go. If I'm thinking Havertz and Sancho as a potential pre-Foden transfer, I'm leaning more towards Havertz, looking at your graph, noting his big returns compared to Sancho's big returns there. I thought that's quite interesting to just compare the big returns and the small returns from the different players.
Absolutely. Like, the big returns mean that they have been scored from an easier opportunity, and we always want players that either create those easy opportunities for their teammates or have those easy opportunities themselves. It's just a positioning thing. If you're really talented at creating those chances for yourself or for your teammates, I want you in my FPL team, because it's more predictive of the future. It's going to happen more often than maybe, someone cracking in a wonder goal ever so often. So yes, you talked about what you were going to do with your team. I think let's move on to talk about Game Week 31 bus team for Mr. FPL Zaghi, and we've got your team up here. 3-4-3. Ramsdale and Alexander-Arnold are flagged. Hopefully they'll both be okay. It sort of sounded like Alexander-Arnold was a bit of an international break injury, so he could get out of duty. Well, fingers crossed for that anyway. Not so sure about Ramsdale, though, because obviously he missed out in Game Week 30. Leno played instead. So definitely one to keep an eye on. You've got a Foster as a backup against Liverpool, which isn't ideal. But talk me through the rest of your squad. You've got one double Game Week player there in Anthony Gordon.
Yeah, just quickly on the Foster Ramsdale thing, I actually don't mind playing Foster away to Liverpool. Watford will, of course, concede most likely multiple goals, but Liverpool are averaging something like 6 or 8 shots. I can't remember the stat exactly, but 6 or 8 shots on target every single match. So you'd have to imagine that Foster's going to get a couple of saves in there as well. So if I don't have Ramsdale and Foster comes in, he might get me 2 or 3 points with a couple of save points in there. We don't know, but I'm not going to bother a transfer on a goalkeeper at this stage of the season. But yeah, my team, I've got Ramsdale in goals, Trent, Cody and Doherty in defence. I've got Saka, Salah, Son and Gordon in midfield. And then up front, I've got Lacazette, Broja and Kane. On the bench, I've got Harvey Barnes. So I'm benching Barnes away to Manchester United. I just don't see how he gets into the team. I mean, he might start in place of Broja, but I think Leeds is a great fixture for Southampton. And then I've got Kilman and Dan Burn on the bench as well. Now, last game week, I was going into Game Week 30 with the intention to roll the transfer and then to use 2 transfers for 31 and start targeting City and Chelsea and Liverpool players, the players that we've already spoken about on the stream. But with the news of Raphinha possibly being out with COVID, I made the decision to bring in Harvey Barnes. Now, I don't have any chips remaining, and so I need to start thinking about how do I get through 33 and 36? How do I maximize the amounts of points that I can get without kind of going too heavy on any particular double game week? For instance, if I went too heavy on game week 33, I brought in Ryan Fraser. We've spoken about him. I bring in Jadon Sancho and Bruno Fernandes. I get to game week 34 and I need to take multiple hits to then get game week 36 target. So I need to try and adopt a really balanced approach with my transfers. And Harvey Barnes fits that. He's got the double game week in 33, again in 36. And I think he's a good asset for Leicester for his price as well. So that's why I decided to bring in Harvey Barnes last week. But it means that this game week, I'm very likely to roll, which is scary because, as we've already mentioned, City play Burnley, Liverpool play Watford. I think Chelsea have a decent game against Brentford as well. So looking at my team, no Robbo as a second Liverpool defender could hurt. No City coverage against Burnley could hurt. And I'm a little concerned about all of that. But with 0.0 in the bank, I don't really have the flexibility to make any moves. And so I think that my team looks okay on paper. I can roll this game week. And then in game week 32, I can look to potentially downgrade Son, which doesn't feel great losing Son, but his price is just a bit too expensive, and it will allow me to get in a Cancelo or a Reece James or whoever I want to target from then.
Yeah, you need someone to be a cash cow, and I think Son is probably the most obvious pick. And I think you need to move away from Spurs to a certain extent, as in triple Spurs. But yeah, we've talked about City, we've talked about Chelsea, all of this stream. How do we get these sorts of players in? And what's your transfer plan, your current transfer plan for up to game week 33? So you have 3 or 4 transfers up to game week 33. How are you going to spend those 3 or 4 transfers?
Yeah, I haven't calculated the exact amount of doubles I have for game week 33. I think as things stand, I've probably got 6 or 7 currently in my team for game week 33 because I've got Dan Burn on the bench. Harvey Barnes is 2. I think we've got the triple Arsenal, so that's 5 at least. And then we might have... Spurs don't double in 33, do they? I think they just double in 36.
Yeah, they just have Brighton in 33, but you've got Bruyne there who has a double for Saints.
Yeah. So I've got 6 double game week players for 33 already. I'm not too concerned about trying to bring in any more doublers for 33. I think my transfer strategy at this point would be to, as I said, roll the transfer this week. I don't want to be taking unnecessary hits. Use Son as the cash cow to start upgrading my defence. Looking at guys like Reece James, building towards game week 36. So I don't really have specific players in mind just yet, but defence is an area that I definitely want to improve. I want to lose my Wolves players. I've got Kilman and Cody there. And so by the time game week 36 rolls around, I want to have, at least one City defender, at least a Reece James or even a Havertz as a Chelsea coverage for game week 36. I want to have the representation from the big 3. I've only got 2 at the moment. And so my transfers between now and game week 36 will be used to target Reece James, Cancelo, Laporte, potentially a Robertson as well. And to make those transfers in defence and potentially 1 or 2 in midfield, I need to lose Son. Lacazette's head's on the chopping block a little bit just because of his price point. If I could move Lacazette to like a Martinelli, of course they're in different positions, but the price saving going Lacazette to a Weghorst and then, a midfielder up to Martinelli, for instance, would just be, wonderful for the rest of the team. But yeah, I just can't really do that too easily at the moment. So yeah, in terms of broad strategy, I'm kind of rambling a little bit. My plan is I'm satisfied with 33. Let's start building towards 36, getting in City, Chelsea, and maybe one more Liverpool player.
I think Lacazette on to a cheaper forward is a really good way of funding all of those moves as well, because yes, he's been absolutely in fantastic form, Lacazette, but it's not the most obvious FPL option. Like the small assists he's been having all season aren't particularly predictive. As long as Saka and Martinelli start just scoring wonder goals, keep scoring wonder goals from his little tap-ons, then
Yeah.
fine. But
Yeah.
you know, I think there are better options out there, and if you can use him to fund, you know, the likes of Cancelo and James, and I think that's an absolutely fantastic option. The problem is that he has a double in 33, so it's difficult to move him on in advance of that. So
Exactly.
maybe from 34 onwards, he can be the transfer out to bring in some City boys, Foden and Cancelo or Laporte or whoever. But yeah, it seems like you've got a decent plan there, and yeah, transfers are precious. Like people. I do this too. I always think I need this player, I need that player, I need like 5 different players, and then I go, I've only got 2 transfers. How do I do this? So everyone falls into the trap of making like -4s, -8s. But I mean, recently that hasn't been a trap because in double game weeks there's a huge upside to taking hits. So, you know, maybe it'll work in 33, maybe it won't. But you know, prioritizing these players is really difficult at the moment.
Yeah, it is. It's a balancing act. Like last season, I think I overindulged in chasing the upside towards the end of the season between game weeks 30 and 38, because I think sometimes we can fall into the trap of viewing it as kind of a microcosm in itself. At game week 30 to 38, we need to have the best team every single game week. You know, we can look at the Fantasy Football Scout team of the week, if you like, the scout selection, and we're like, I've only got 4 out of those 11 players. Maybe my team's suboptimal this game week. I need to take lots of hits to try and get these players in for the fixtures that they've got. And, you know, then you go to the next game week and you find that all those transfers you've made have left you with a complete mess of a team. So planning and strategy does not go out the window just because we've only got a few game weeks left and when we're trying to get the maximum kind of rank increase that we can.
Yeah, absolutely. Like we've seen throughout this video, certain fixtures are particularly good for certain types of players. Always worth searching for that upside in particular, 2 or 3 game weeks worth of you know, transfers. So yeah, definitely pay attention. That planning will definitely pay off. And yeah, plenty of chips still to be used out there in the community. I only have 1 free hit left. So I'm a little bit worried. I think a lot of people with wildcard and free hits and bench boosts might be able to catch up. So yeah, I'm envious of you guys. But let's move on to my team. Let's finish the stream with mine. I'm on a 3-5-2 at the moment. Lots of flags, sadly. I've got Ramsdale and Alexander-Arnold like you do, but also Digne and Jimenez on the bench. Jimenez red flagged because of his suspension. So it kind of makes it easy for me to target players out. So Jimenez is almost certainly going to be a transfer out. I have 2 free transfers this week. So hopefully I can use them, both of them, or even take a mini wild card and take a -4 to sort 3 out. What I was currently looking at was Jimenez down to Weghorst reluctantly, and then Digne up to Reece James. I can do that for free, or I could do like Jimenez down to a 4.5, Coutinho up to Havertz, and a Digne up to, I think it was like a Robertson or a Cancelo or somewhere. So I've got options. I don't know what I'll do, but they all seem like it's an upside move, even if it's for a -4. So we will see. I'm kind of keen to move money out of the forward line, to be honest, because Jimenez, Kane and Lacazette, quite expensive. I kind of want to move and fund those midfield assets to get in Havertz, Foden, and maybe even a Sancho if I wanted to be brave. But like you, Ryan, I want some cover from each of those Chelsea, City and Liverpool sides. I'm not 100% sure whether I can afford to double up with Robertson as well as Trent, but going Alexander-Arnold, Reece James and maybe a Cancelo or a Laporte would be sufficient, as it were, and then having a really, really hefty midfield kind of fills me with confidence a little bit.
Yeah. If so, you said you've got 1 free hit left. Are you planning to a free hit in 36?
Yes, I think so. I think Braz and Snaldo did a great video last week looking at the fixture run and the potential double game weeks that these teams might have in 33 and 36 and even 37. And I think that the free hit team that they constructed was really, really good for 36. Because a lot of people are going to be bench boosting then. So therefore, that squad is going to be stretched. You're not going to be able to go for the same players that maybe a free hit in 36 would be able to. And I really like the team that they put together. So that kind of convinced me to do a 36. I think, like you, where you need to balance your transfers, going for the likes of City, Chelsea, Liverpool, keeping Arsenal for the time being, maybe moving away from Spurs, is the right way to go over game week 33. Because even though those guys have a single fixture, they still have the ability to score loads of points. And I think probably over the long term, that's probably what I will do too.
They described it quite well. I think we're kind of saying that there's less risk in free hitting 36, but potentially less upside because, you're making transfers now to get in City and Chelsea and potentially a Robertson. And those are the exact same players that you'll have on your free hit 36. So I'm intrigued, how different will your 36 squad be from your potential 36 free hit team be if you're going to be making those transfers anyway?
Yeah, I think Harry Kane is probably the key one there because he takes up quite a lot of funds. So redistributing those funds around the squad will be useful. It depends how much I go for game week 33, getting in like a Leicester player or a Newcastle player. If I ignored those, I could probably get to a really optimal 36 team, but it means I wouldn't be utilising 33 as much. So it really depends. I think if I'm going to 3 hit in 36 or even 37, if it becomes an option, then I'll probably go slightly less on all in on City, all in on Chelsea, all in on Liverpool, and just prioritising getting 2 players at least from each side for the time being. And then the squad players around, like Raphinhas, the Coutinhos, the Kulusevskis, can sort of move around to these players based on the relevant optimal player for that game week specifically. So, yeah,
for sure.
It's a complicated time in FPL. It's definitely a complicated time, and I feel there's a lot of players to consider and weigh through. And whatever we choose, as long as it's a logical decision, it will be fine. And
I love your optimism. That's great.
That's why we love FPL, isn't it? That this agonizing decision making that we go through, but it's all fun at the end of the day, and that's the reason why we do it. But yeah, I think we'll end the stream. Right, we'll be talking like nearly an hour and 50 minutes, so it's quite a long one this week, but a lot to get through nonetheless. So thank you very much for joining me and talking so eloquently about FPL.
Thanks, Ted. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks, everyone in the chat, for joining as well. It's great to have you with us tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, fingers crossed for all of you in Game Week 31. Hopefully that's been useful. I will put the timestamps for the particular players if you're joining or watching this non-live, and hopefully you can skip to the relevant players. But yes, thanks again, and we will see you next time. All the best.